Look closely at this landscape. It's beautiful, isn't it? The majestic Rockies, snow-capped peaks that pierce the clouds. A playground for the adventurous. But listen to it. This is the sound of the silence that swallows everything. The silence that hides the things that defy logic, that ignore the rules of physics, and that leave behind a chilling trail of impossible questions. This is the world where the cases I investigate for David Paulides, missing 411, often begin. A world of vast, stunning wilderness that suddenly turns hostile, suddenly turns deceptive. Today, we go to Vail, Colorado. The year is 2014. The subject is a well-trained, experienced emergency room physician, a man of science and logic. His name was James Jim McGrogan. And the woods of Vail did not let him go without leaving behind a shadow of confusion. They created a classic, inexplicable 411 profile. Jim McGrogan was 39 years old when he disappeared. He wasn't some novice hiker who wandered off the beaten path. This was a man who understood human physiology and survival. He was a doctor, an ER physician from Chesterton, Indiana, a triathlete. He was an experienced hiker, camper, and a dedicated snowboarder. The wilderness was not his enemy. It was his escape. He knew the risks. He knew the protocols. He was, by all accounts, highly prepared for the environment of the high country. And yet, the high country claimed him. In the spring of 2014, Jim was in Vail. On April 3rd, 2014, he headed out for what should have been a routine, refreshing trip into the high country. A simple day trip. The specific details around his disappearance are scant. And that's a chilling signature of these 411 cases. They often occur in a flash, an inexplicable moment when the person just evaporates. We know he was in the Vail area. We know he was doing what he loved. The assumption was that he was hiking or perhaps getting in a last bit of high-altitude training, preparing for a future endurance event. But Jim McGrogan did not return, and when you look at the circumstances and you compare them to the thousands of files I've compiled over the years for David Paulides, missing 411, the familiar, sickening pattern begins to emerge. It's the pattern of a clinical, targeted extraction, the type of case where the search teams scratch their heads and quietly change their initial assumptions. The search for Jim McGrogan began almost immediately. You have a missing doctor, a respected member of the community. The search was thorough, involving helicopters and ground teams. The terrain in Vail is rugged, yes, but this is a heavily tracked recreational area. It's not the deep, untrammeled interior of the Olympic National Park. And yet, days turned into a week. Nothing. No discarded gear. No broken branches that indicated a fall. No slide marks. The woods gave up no secrets about where Jim McGrogan had gone. It was like he simply stepped into another dimension. Then came the discovery. I want you to pay close attention to this, because it touches on the core anomalies of David Paulides, missing 411. The sheer improbability of the find location. Jim McGrogan was eventually found, but the location was, for lack of a better word, impossible. He was found in an area that searchers had already covered, or in a location that was incredibly difficult for a person to reach on their own. The location was remote and highly elevated, consistent with the high-altitude disappearances that populate my files. He wasn't simply lost near the trailhead. He was deposited or found where the average person would struggle to climb. And here's the critical point, the true hallmark of a missing 411 case. He was found without his footwear. We have a highly fit, experienced, rational man found dead in the cold wilderness, having somehow removed his shoes or socks. This is a recurring, baffling detail in my research. Why would a person in a survival situation especially in the near-freezing temperatures of the Colorado high country in April. Voluntarily remove the one thing that protects them from hypothermia and injury. It makes no sense. The common explanation is paradoxical undressing due to extreme hypothermia. But this only explains the removal of clothing. It does not explain how the person traveled the significant distance to the final spot. For Jim McGrogan, we have the highly improbable find location and the missing footwear. This is not a simple slip and fall case. This is something else entirely. It suggests interference. When the official reports close the file on a case like this, the narrative is neat and tidy. Exposure, accident, hypothermia. The public is given a logical explanation, and the file is stamped closed. But the logical explanation fails when you scrutinize the evidence. What caused Jim McGrogan to climb up or be taken to that high? Remote location. What caused him to shed his protective layers? In the vast, silent forests of Vail, particularly at high altitude, I've come to consider a hypothesis that moves beyond simple human error. And I'm talking about something that links many of these high elevation disappearances together. I call it the silent watcher. This is the feeling reported by people who have had strange encounters of being intensely observed, not by a natural predator, but by something that understands your movements, something that is silently stalking you. And that can induce a state of profound confusion or panic. This may be a known cryptid, or a force we don't understand that lives at higher elevations. Think about Jim. He's a trained physician. He's rational. He's fit. To assume he simply lost his mind and walked miles to an inaccessible place to die without his shoes is to discard his entire professional and personal experience. What if there was an interaction? What if Jim McGrogan was subjected to a sudden, intense psychological event? Something that overrode his natural survival instinct. Could the high altitude environment itself, a place where people often suffer disorientation, be a kind of trigger zone for this unknown entity? The Rockies are notorious for these 411 clusters. My research suggests that some force or entity has an uncanny ability to exploit moments of low light, high altitude, and isolation. It takes people who are capable and places them in scenarios that are just off-center enough to defy conventional explanation. Did Jim McGrogan, in his final hours, feel that chilling presence? Was he led off the trail by a deep, sudden sense of unease that made him try to flee, running from something? Did the act of shedding his shoes, the final irrational act, occur because he was trying desperately to escape something that was pursuing him silently through the dark, cold woods, something that perhaps he only sensed and never truly saw? The sheer logistical impossibility of his location and the bizarre state in which he was found tells us this was not an ordinary accident. It was the result of an interaction with a hidden, unknown element of the wilderness. The Watcher had claimed another victim. The story of James Jim Carl McGrogan is a tragedy. A life of purpose and skill extinguished in a high, cold, and lonely place. A place that should have been familiar and friendly. The most public final note about Jim's life was the request that donations be made to the Vail Mountain Rescue Group. It's a poignant detail, suggesting a deep, final respect for the mountains, even as they held his body hostage. But for those of us who study the phenomena of missing persons in our national parks and forests, the death of Jim McGrogan is another entry in a cold, stark database, a file that mirrors countless others. A high-altitude location, an experienced victim, a body found in an improbable spot, the absence of footwear. These are the criteria that scream David Paulides, missing 411. They are the criteria that tell us the official explanation is incomplete, and perhaps deliberately misleading. We are dealing with an intelligence in the woods, a hidden mechanism that is capable of isolating, confusing, and removing people with a chilling efficiency. Jim McGrogan went out for a day in the mountains he loved. He encountered the side of the wilderness that the average visitor never sees. He encountered the riddle, and the riddle kept him. There are questions here that search and rescue logs can't answer. Questions that medical examiners often choose to ignore. Who was with Jim McGrogan in those final, confusing moments? What forced him to take off his boots? And how did he get to that impossibly difficult spot on the slopes of Vail? The answers remain hidden in the dense pine shadows, locked away by the silent watcher. This is the central mystery that drives Mystery Rift. We explore the edge of the map, where the official narrative breaks down and the true, unsettling nature of the wilderness reveals itself. If you want more deep dives into the inexplicable disappearances that defy all logic, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened to Jim McGrogan in Vail, Colorado, in 2014? Was it a simple accident, or was it the work of something far more ancient and far more sinister? Until next time, keep your head up and always be aware of what's watching you from the woods.